Hello guys, and today we are going to do Microsoft Azure Fundamentals AZ-900 test, which will consist, I believe, of 20 or 25 questions. So let's open this test up. And this is Microsoft Azure Fundamentals AZ-900 Practice Test 1. And this is from this website here. Practice tests are absolutely free. So, no further ado, let's get started. A company needs to monitor and log the performance of their Azure resources, including virtual machines, storage and networking components. Which services should they use to collect and analyze log data in Azure? Azure Monitor, Azure Sentinel, Azure Log Analytics, Azure Security Center, or Azure Event Hub. And here the correct answer should be Azure Log Analytics. And yes guys, if you are interested in more questions, then go to my channel's homepage and you can find much more practice tests on different exams. So yes, Azure Log Analytics is the correct answer, and here is the explanation. Azure Log Analytics is a tool within the Azure monitors that allows organizations to collect, analyze and visualize data from various resources within their Azure environment, helping with performance, monitoring and troubleshooting. A company wants to integrate their on-premises Active Directory with Azure Active Directory to manage user identities across both environments. Which Azure service will help with this integration? Azure Active Directory Business to Business or B2B, Azure Key Vault, Azure AD Connect, Azure AD Domain Services, or Azure Virtual Machines. And here the correct answer would be Azure AD Connect. As Azure AD Connect is tools that integrates on-premises Active Directory with Azure Active Directory, allowing for unified identity management system across cloud and on-premises environments. A company is concerned about the security of their sensitive data in the cloud and wants to implement encryption for data at rest. Which Azure service can they use to encrypt their data without additional overhead? Azure Key Vault, Azure Security Center, Azure Firewall, Azure Disk Encryption, or Azure Active Directory. And by the way guys, if you are doing these practice tests, this is the best way to learn for any of these technical examinations, because you are getting with these practice tests straight to the point from different subjects, as when you are studying, for example, taking some course, some video course, whatever you are doing, or reading a book, you are concentrating or spending time only on one subject for a long period of time, where when you are taking these tests, you are able to go, or in your head, the information is able to go through many subjects at the same time, and these quizzes help you to prepare much faster for these examinations rather than taking these courses. However, you should take some course at least once, whether it's video course or, for example, book or some reading course, whatever you prefer best. So let's get back to our test, and what is the correct answer here? And here's the correct answer is Azure Disk Encryption, as Azure Disk Encryption uses BitLocker for Windows and DMCrypt for Linux to encrypt data on Azure Virtual Machine disks, ensuring the data is securely stored at rest. A company needs a solution to store large amounts of data that can be accessed by their web application and processed by their analytics platform. The data is unstructured and includes text, images, and videos. Which Azure service should they use for storage? Azure Blob Storage, Azure Table Storage, Azure Files, Azure Disk Storage, or Azure QEs. And here the correct answer is Azure Blob Storage, as Azure Blob Storage is designed for storing infrastructured data such as text, images, videos, and backups. It is highly scalable and suitable for big data analytics applications. A company is planning to deploy a cloud-based solution that enables users to access their desktops and applications remotely, which Azure service provides a fully managed virtual desktop infrastructure (VDI), Azure Active Directory, Azure App Service, Azure Virtual Desktop, Azure Site Recovery, or Azure Virtual Machines. And here the correct answer would be Azure Virtual Desktop, as Azure Virtual Desktop is fully managed desktop and application virtualization service that enables users to access their desktops and applications remotely, providing scalability and security. A company wants to implement disaster recovery for their on-premises infrastructure in Azure. Which Azure service should they use to replicate their virtual machines and applications to the cloud? Azure Backup, Azure Site Recovery, Azure Monitor, Azure Blob Storage, or Azure Virtual Machines. And here the correct answer is Azure Site Recovery, as Azure Site Recovery enables businesses to replicate their on-premises virtual machines and applications to Azure, ensuring disaster recovery and business continuity in the event of failure. A company needs to deploy a virtual machine with the least amount of management overhead. Which Azure service should they use to meet this requirement? Azure Virtual Machines, Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets, Azure App Service, Azure Kubernetes Service, or Azure Container Instances. And here the correct answer would be or is Azure Container Instances, as Azure Container Instances allow businesses to quickly deploy and manage containers without the overhead of managing virtual machines, providing a fully managed container service. A company needs to ensure that their virtual machines are placed in different availability zones to providing high availability. Which Azure feature will help with this? Azure Traffic Manager, Azure Availability Sets, Azure Blob Storage, Azure Virtual Network, or Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets. And here the correct answer is Azure Availability Sets, as Azure Availability Sets ensures the virtual machines are deployed across multiple physical servers in different fault domains, improving availabilities in the event of hardware failure. A business wants to automate the deployment of Azure resources using templates. Which service should they use? Azure Automation, Azure DevOps, Azure Logic Apps, Azure Functions, or Azure Resource Manager ARM templates. And the correct answer is this Azure Resource Manager or ARM templates. As Azure Resource Manager, ARM templates allow businesses to define the infrastructure and services they need in a declarative way, enabling automated deployment of resources. A company wants to create a secure and scalable environment for running containerized applications. Which service should they use to manage the underlying infrastructure for containers? Azure Functions, Azure App Service, Azure Logic Apps, Azure Kubernetes Service or AKS, or Azure Virtual Machines. And here the correct answer is Azure Kubernetes Service or AKS. As Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS provides a managed Kubernetes environment for deploying and managing containerized applications at scale, simplifying container orchestration and management. A company wants to ensure high availability for their application by distributing traffic across multiple regions. Which Azure service should they use? Azure Load Balancer, Azure App Service, Azure Traffic Manager, Azure CDN, or Azure Blob Storage. And here the correct answer is Azure Traffic Manager. As Azure Traffic Manager is a global DNS-based traffic load balancer that distributes traffic across multiple regions, ensuring high availability and performance for applications. A company wants to securely manage and distribute certificates, secrets, and keys for their cloud applications. Which service should they use? Azure Active Directory, Azure Key Vault, Azure Security Center, Azure Policy, or Azure Monitor. And here the correct answer is Azure Key Vault, as Azure Key Vault is designed for securely storing and managing keys, secrets, and certificates used in cloud applications and services. And the next question, a company needs a solution to monitor and analyze the performance of their Azure resources, including virtual machines and storage accounts. Which service should they use? Azure Security Center, Azure Sentinel, Azure Log Analytics, Azure Traffic Manager, or Azure Monitor. And here the correct answer is Azure Monitor, as Azure Monitor provides comprehensive monitoring capabilities, allowing businesses to track the performance and health of their Azure resources in real time. And next question, a business needs to ensure that its cloud-based data is backed up regularly and can be restored in case of failure. Which Azure service should they use to create and manage these backups? Azure Site Recovery, Azure Storage Accounts, Azure File Sync, Azure Backup, or Azure Blob Storage. And here the correct answer is Azure Backup, as Azure Backup is cloud-based backup service that helps businesses to protect and recover their data by scheduling regular backups of virtual machines, databases, and other resources. A company needs to manage user identities and provide single sign-on or SSO access to cloud and on-premises applications. Which Azure service should they use? Azure AD Connect, Azure Security Center, Azure AD B2C, Azure Sentinel, or Azure Active Directory or Azure AD. And here the correct answer is Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, as Azure Active Directory is cloud-based identity and access management service that provides features such as single sign-on or SSO, multi-factor authentication, and identity governance. A company is setting up an environment where users can access their desktops and applications remotely. Which Azure service would help them create secure and scalable virtual desktop infrastructure? Azure Virtual Desktop, Azure Active Directory, Azure Storage Accounts, Azure Functions, or Azure Monitor. And here the correct answer is Azure Active Directory. Actually Azure Virtual Desktop. And here I also made a mistake, as Azure Virtual Desktop is fully managed desktop and app virtualization service that allows users to access their desktops and applications remotely in secure and scalable manner. As you can see, guys, even I make mistakes sometimes. And a business needs to implement solutions that can automatically scale web applications based on traffic load. Which Azure service should they use for this requirement? Azure Virtual Machines, Azure App Service, Azure Kubernetes Service, Azure Load Balancer, or Azure Functions. And here the correct answer is Azure App Service, as Azure App Service automatically scales web applications based on traffic demand, providing a platform for building and deploying scalable web app without managing the infrastructure. A company is building an application that will run containers in the cloud. They need a fully managed Kubernetes service to orchestrate these containers. Which Azure service should they use? Azure Functions, Azure App Service, Azure Kubernetes Service or AKS, Azure Virtual Machines, or Azure Logic Apps. And the correct answer here is Azure Kubernetes Service or AKS. As Azure Kubernetes Service is managed Kubernetes service that helps deploy, manage, scale containerized applications, simplifying container orchestration in the cloud. A business needs to monitor and manage their resources in Azure and ensure compliance with internal security policies. Which service should they use to manage security and compliance across their Azure resources? Azure Sentinel, Azure Monitor, Azure Log Analytics, Azure Advisor, or Azure Security Center. And here the correct answer is Azure Security Center, as Azure Security Center is a unified security management system that provides threat protection, security recommendations, and compliance tracking for Azure resources. And next question, a developer needs to create a solution that involves managing large amounts of unstructured data such as text and images. Which Azure storage service should they use? So here we are talking about storage service. Azure Files, Azure Table Storage, Azure Blob Storage, Azure Queue Storage, or Azure Managed Disk. And the correct answer here is Azure Blob Storage, as Azure Blob Storage is designed for storing large amounts of unstructured data including text, images, videos, and other binary data. A company needs to securely store and manage encryption keys used by their applications in Azure. Which service should they use? Azure Active Directory, Azure Key Vault, Azure Blob Storage, Azure Security Center, or Azure Firewall. And here the correct answer is Azure Key Vault, as Azure Key Vault is cloud service that securely stores and manages keys, secrets, and certificates, helping organizations maintain control over sensitive data. A business is planning to move some of its on-premises workloads to the cloud. They need to run virtual machines in the cloud with the same configurations as their on-premises servers. Which Azure service should they use to migrate these workloads? Azure Kubernetes Service, Azure App Service, Azure Storage Accounts, Azure Site Recovery, or Azure Virtual Machines. And here the correct answer is Azure Virtual Machines, as Azure Virtual Machines provide on-demand scalable compute resources in the cloud. They allow businesses to run virtual workloads similar to their on-premises servers. A company wants to host highly available web application with low latency access for users around the world. Which Azure service should they use to ensure optimal performance and global availability? Azure Virtual Machines, Azure Blob Storage, Azure Content Delivery Network or CDN, Azure App Service, or Azure SQL Database. And here's the correct answer. I believe that you all know that when it comes to all the world or access or providing access to some application, real-time and fast access, that would be Content Delivery Network or CDN. So Azure CDN caches content at strategically placed edge locations worldwide, improving the performance and availability of web applications for global users. And next question. A developer needs to build a serverless application that runs code in response to events, such as new file being uploaded to Azure Blob Storage. Actually, let's read it one more time. A developer needs to build a serverless application that runs code in response to events, such as new file being uploaded to Azure Blob Storage. Which service should they use? Azure Functions, Azure Virtual Machines, Azure App Service, Azure Logical Apps, or Azure Kubernetes Service. And here the correct answer is Azure Functions, as Azure Functions is serverless computer service that allows developers to run event-driven code without managing infrastructure. It is ideal for processing events such as those from Amazon Blob Storage. And a company is looking to create a solution that scales automatically based on the number of users accessing the application. Which Azure service should they use to meet this requirement? Azure Virtual Machines, Azure Blob Storage, Azure Kubernetes Service, Azure Functions, or Azure App Service. And here's the correct answer is Azure App Service, as Azure App Service provides a fully managed platform for building and hosting web applications. It includes built-in scaling capabilities, allowing the application to scale automatically based on demand. And see results, and we answered one question incorrectly from these 25 questions, so we get only 96% out of all this test. So yes guys, this was quick video on another test, and if you found this video useful, leave a like, share this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and see you in the next one.